Hello again, I'm Doug Smith, and welcome to the 11 December 2015 edition of Portsmouth This Week, the voice of Portsmouth Town Hall. Our topic this week is the recent PARCC assessment that was done in our schools, and our guest to discuss this is Assistant Superintendent of Portsmouth Schools, Tom Kenworthy. Welcome back to the show, Tom.
Thank you, Doug.
We know you were on last week, so you're doing double duty here. I wonder if we could start by talking about PARCC itself. Let me just explain for people what the acronym means.
Sure.
Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. So could you talk a little bit about that itself? How do we get into this thing? Where did it come from? And those kind of things.
Sure. So PARCC essentially now is the assessment that's in place, used by various states, including Rhode Island. So in Rhode Island, it's now the state assessment that we use for accountability, determining how well students in schools are doing according to the Common Core standards. So the two main areas that are covered there are English language arts or literacy, reading and writing, and mathematics. So the Common Core standards are the standards that we use to build the curriculum off of in those areas, and the PARCC is the assessment that's in place to designed to measure how well students are understanding what it is that we're teaching them in those areas.
Okay, now where did this come from? Was this from a group of educators somewhere, and how did it become national?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, when tests like assessments like this are made, it's always a group of educators, a lot of collaboration back and forth that are designing the measurement. The movement to develop the PARCC is closely tied to the movement around the Common Core. Common Core was an attempt for the first time to have a more common set of standards that we could use among all the states in the United States. So it looks like it hasn't quite hit every state the way the original intention was of the hopes of what this might do. So to date, there are 46 states in the District of Columbia that have adopted the Common Core. So there's still a few holdouts out there. And
now, was this part of the No Child Left Behind law back several years ago?
There's not a direct correlation to either the Common Core or the PARCC and the No Child Left Behind Act. No Child Left Behind just kind of, for the first time back in 2001 when it was passed, said that every state in the nation had to have an assessment system in place that essentially the U.S. Department of Education had approved, that was measuring how well students were doing in English language arts and mathematics. Eventually science has been added to that as well. So the No Child Left Behind Act, if you will, kind of is what strengthened the assessment system and its use for accountability, which by the way, one of the things I was probably going to point out at some point, we just finally had a reauthorization of that act. It'll probably take a while for
I saw that.
So people will probably start to see more and more about that. And that was, it's been a couple of years actually where they've been tossing around ideas for what the rewrite of that was going to look like. So I think that one of the key points, while it'll take some time to really figure out exactly how the reauthorization looks different from the original act, one of the key points to take away from that is assessment and accountability are still in there. So that has not gone away. Every state is still going to have to assess students in literacy, mathematics, and science as we move forward.
Yeah. You're talking about the Common Core, and I assume that kind of changes over the years, right? I mean, there's a lot of technology and things that wasn't around 20 years ago.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the Common Core was this attempt to develop these more rigorous standards that were certainly more applicable to this day and age in literacy and mathematics.
Now, did we or anybody like locally, Rhode Island, get involved in the development of those Common Core standards?
At the state level, we definitely sent representatives. I'm not sure. I wasn't in district at the time when the Common Core was being written. I'm not sure if Portsmouth actually sent anybody, but every district had the opportunity to nominate educators, whether it was teachers, principals, whoever wanted to participate. So those standards were eventually, written kind of field tested, just like when we talk about PARCC and the assessment itself, that continually happens as well. It's, they get educators together who do that work.
Now, how and when did we get involved with PARCC?
Portsmouth and every public school district in the state of Rhode Island essentially, we go along with what at the state level, the Rhode Island Department of Education, decides, with our input and feedback is going to happen. So the PARCC was administered for the first time last year. So Common Core itself, the rollout started in around 2010, and then we've introduced it more and more over the last few years. And then last year was the introduction of PARCC, the assessment now designed to measure the Common Core standards in literacy and mathematics.
Okay, and what did we use before for an assessment tool?
So before this, we were using the NECAP. That was the New England Common Assessment Program. We were in a multi-state consortium with that as well. That was with the New England part, New Hampshire, Vermont, and eventually Maine came into that. So that was 4 states, including us, that were in the NECAP consortium, and that's what we used as the state assessment. That was based on another set of standards as well, so that was pre-Common Core. So when the Common Core came about, every state now who adopted it had to figure out what assessment they were going to use.
So now, essentially, are children in public schools in all the states that are in PARCC, they're all taking the same tests, essentially?
Right, so that's one of the benefits of going into a multi-state collaboration, and that's certainly, so one of the things, so whether it was No Child Left Behind or this new reauthorization that I referred to before, and the point that I was trying to make about that there's no way around the assessment piece. We have to have a state assessment that we use for accountability in literacy, mathematics, and science. So not having an assessment isn't an option. States do have a say as to what assessment they use. So, we happen to be in the PARCC consortium with a number of other states. There's another consortium around another test that was designed to measure the Common Core standards that's used among multiple states. And then there are some states who just went off and developed their own assessment. Rhode Island, and I think we can all see kind of the rationale behind this, felt that we didn't have the resources, being such a small state. It didn't make a lot of sense for us to develop our own assessment. There's a lot of time and effort and resources that go into it. So, at the time the decision was made to go with PARCC, the feeling was it made more sense for us to join one of these multi-state consortiums.
Sure. Well, our children will be competing with people from all over the country and all over the world. So I think the idea of setting standards and even setting high standards is probably a good one.
Right.
You recently hosted a public forum at the middle school on this assessment. Who did you want to attend that, and what did you hope to accomplish?
So, anybody was welcome to attend. We tried to do the best job that we could of advertising it and getting the word out, and then we're certainly open to anyone, and whether they lived in Portsmouth or not. But our target audience was certainly Portsmouth residents, particularly parents who still had questions about PARCC or the Common Core. So we had a number of topics that we wanted to present on, kind of building up is the way we designed it to the PARCC, particularly since our results from last year's assessment were just released, and when we come back after the holiday break, we're really going to be concentrating on getting ready for this year's round of testing. So myself, our principals presented some information, and then we were fortunate to have a representative from the Rhode Island Department of Education, Marion Snyder, who I thought did a great job of presenting information on the PARCC and answering questions.
Yes, I want to tell our audience that there is a video of this forum. It's will air on this public access channel as well as being available on YouTube. And people can find it by going on our town website and clicking on the link if they want to watch the thing. How do you think the forum went from your perspective?
I thought it went well in that it accomplished what we were looking to do, get people together and people who maybe had different opinions and certainly be able to answer questions that people had. So it accomplished what we were looking to do of kind of creating this dialogue around these topics, and certainly we're always willing and welcome to hear the different opinions or questions that people may have. But ultimately, I certainly personally believe when it comes to things like this, we need to maybe have those conversations, ask those questions as adults, but at the end of the day, hopefully all be able to rally around our students and have them,
Sure.
doing what they need to do.
Now, the thing is, how do we go about understanding PARCC results and things? I wonder if you could talk a little bit about
Sure.
that.
So I do have, this is probably one of the best graphics to do that was a slide that we used. So right after Monday evening's forum on Tuesday night at our school committee meeting, we presented, as all districts are doing right around this time, the results that were recently released on PARCC. And so what's going to happen is when parents receive the individual results for their students, they're going to see a score somewhere between the 650 and 850 number. One of the things that PARCC has tried to do a good job of is kind of making this comment. So whatever grade level a student's at, whatever test they're taking, within the various assessments that are available under PARCC, the score is going to be somewhere between the 650 and 850. And then at pretty much these increments that we move up is where the levels are. So PARCC is scored along 5 levels. And when we, one of the things that we're always looking at to determine how did we do as a district, how did we do as a state, compared to the other states and so forth. So with PARCC, it's this level 4 and 5 that is essentially correlating with proficiency, if you will. So, probably the best analogy to make, this is considered, students kind of successfully demonstrated that they had the knowledge that was being tested. So level 4 is met expectations, level 5 is exceeds expectations. So when we talk about how well we did as a district or a state, it's really how many students were in this level 4 or 5 category.
Okay, I think we should talk a little bit about the PARCC scores in Portsmouth.
Sure.
How did we do,
No.
do you think?
Well, there's certainly room for improvement, and everybody realizes that from top to bottom in our district. So one of the first steps is we have to get our hands on the data and really start digging through it to see. So we were able to present in both English language arts, so that would be reading and writing, and mathematics, how we did at each grade level. One of the first things that you look for when you get these results is, okay, well, how did we do, first of all, against the state average? So one of the good news is, while all of these results, we are hoping will just continue to increase as we move forward, we're above the state average, and in most cases well above the state average, here in Portsmouth, at every grade level for each of these tests. So that's really the first thing. And then, it's natural you start to look at and see, well, how did we do compared to some other districts? And I think Portsmouth is a great community, and people move here for the school system, and we understand that. And so there's a natural comparison that you start to make to some other communities. So there are areas I think that we kind of held our own compared to some of the other top communities in the state, but certainly areas that demonstrated that we need to kind of hopefully see some better results here in Portsmouth to, I think, get ourselves up to the level, if you will, that people expect in this town.
Yeah, now understanding these are aggregated scores.
Yep.
I wonder if we could take, like, they look pretty low to me, to be honest, but, like, for example, let's say, I assume that's 8th grade, and a little less than half met or exceeded.
Yep.
And then the other figure is participation. Why do the participation numbers vary? Because I
Right.
would have thought they'd be constant.
So, and this is a new thing as well for us as we're receiving these results. For instance, when we receive NECAP results, participation, it just never really, I myself have been a principal in a couple of other districts. We never thought twice about participation. We were used to every kid taking the assessment. So one of the things that really kind of grew last year around the time of the PARCC administration was a lot of backlash, both, in our own state and nationally, and we certainly felt it here in Portsmouth, against, for various reasons that people have, this kind of what they saw as a movement towards a national set of standards, and an assessment that's going to be shared among various states. So these participation numbers show us, obviously that not 100% of students participated at any grade level
Yeah,
for
but
us.
look at the 10th grade, I mean, 27%.
Right. So, and in some cases, very low, and realizing that we definitely need to do a much better job of doing everything we can to make sure that our goal is that all students take the assessment at any grade level, and that was certainly part of what that forum on Monday evening was an attempt to, again, engage people in that dialogue.
Can we look at the math scores a
Sure.
little bit? And it looks like, I assume this is grade 8 algebra. 97%
Yeah.
met or exceeded, which is a pretty good mark.
That's one of our highlights, definitely from the data. So math, and some grades we did a little better in math, and in some grades we did a little, but that basically 97% of all students who took the algebra assessment in grade 8. So with algebra is one of those subjects that some students are ready to take it in grade 8, and they do. Other students take kind of reinforcement in math and then take algebra when they get to the high school level. But this was showing us, out of all the students in Portsmouth who took the algebra assessment at grade 8 last year, 97% of them scored at that level 4 or 5. So
but then what happened the next year?
Right. Well,
when you went to grade 9?
And this is actually, when you look at the statewide trends, it's an interesting fact among the data. So across the state, when the results were released, I was able to attend a couple forums that the Department of Education put on, and they had this graphic that showed, there were actually, in some districts, some 7th graders took the algebra assessment. We didn't have any here in Portsmouth. The earliest we would have was 8th grade, but the earlier that a student took the algebra assessment, the better they did. And so by the time you get to high school, you saw some very low proficiency numbers, certainly in our case here in Portsmouth. So that certainly shows
well, as you
us that
say,
there's some work
we
to do there.
did certainly better than the average in Rhode Island.
And better than a lot of other districts. We certainly have some work to do, though, I think, to get us to the level
Was
that
this
we wanna
about
be at.
what you expected, maybe the first time of this assessment?
For me, my fare has been around these participation numbers. So one of the things that I think is, I personally think is really important is that if we want to really have these numbers truly mean something here in Portsmouth and be able to make valid comparisons to how we did to other districts around the state, or even start to look at districts in other states, we have to have full participation. Who were some of these students in these cases, where you pointed out the 27% here. So who were the other 70% of students who didn't take that assessment, and what could their scores have been?
And it's interesting because we take tests all our lives,
Right.
and I think the idea of trying to teach to certain standards, minimum standards, I think is a very good one. And I just can't quite understand unless people have a real fear of government doing anything. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we saw some of that feeding into that movement last year because, like you said, we take tests in just about every area of our lives. We had a state assessment before this, before Common Core or PARCC. We had a state assessment that was based on a set of standards. And again, whether it was here in Portsmouth or other districts that I worked in, I never remember a case of a student not taking the assessment. So when this movement really started to gain momentum last year, it took a lot of educators. I know it did, in my own case, took me by surprise because it was something I've never experienced before.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising to me too that parents would even say anything about it. Just part of school is taking tests.
Yeah, and I get that there may be questions and concerns that people have. Again, we're going to, we're trying to do our best job to address those in the forum. We'll continue to look for opportunities to engage people, but I don't think we're doing our students any favors, Doug, by not having them take this assessment. And ultimately, at whatever point it is, the state is saying there will be a point where this becomes a graduation requirement. So we're not doing our students any
Well,
favors.
I think it might be possible that people are concerned their child won't do well on the tests. But the thing is, if they don't do well, then that gives you an opportunity for improving over the next couple of years.
Right, and
I assume that's what we're going to use this test results for, to try to...
Right, we'll never know if we don't have those results. So this is part of, these results, whether it's this test or any other test that a student takes in school, the way that we're using them at the local level here in our own district and schools is to make better decisions about students, or make better decisions about our curriculum as a whole when we're looking across grade levels. And so it's just, in our case, it's just one piece of data that we're using. Now on the state level, this is about Rhode Island's accountability, to the federal government collectively as they're looking at all these scores. But there's so many other purposes that we're using these assessment results for.
Yeah. Now, can you kind of give us an overall figure for our participation? In other words, I've seen in the 90s, right, 90-something percent. And as I recall, there was some federal law that required 95%.
Right. So that's tied into whether it's the No Child Left Behind Act or the reauthorization that just happened. There is the target when it comes to accountability is 95%. So there's some language in the old act. I'm not sure again how it reads in the new reauthorization. That's one of the things we'll have to take a look at. But it says that there are sanctions that can happen either at the state or district level if that participation rate is below 95%. We were below 95% overall as a district, so that would certainly be a concern for us. The other thing that we know for sure, probably what we're going to feel more immediate on that, is that for accountability, as the state is reporting its information to the federal government, it kind of ranks schools, and that's that can be something that schools can celebrate if they have positive results. But the state has been clear that if you don't have at a school level that 95% participation, that you can't have commended status. So that's the best status.
And I also think the way I was reading it, that some federal funds might be at risk.
Right.
So
That's
a very practical reason.
That's the big question.
To not do that. I think so. So we got the results from the first one, and it seems to me that moving forward, you've got good data here. Moving forward, how do you plan to use this to make our students better or help them improve?
So certainly. So now, we've probably had the results maybe for about 3 weeks or so now. So, first thing is kind of getting all this information out from it, and that's kind of how we did on the whole at each grade level in school. Now we'll really start digging into those individual student results again to be able to see, does this match up with how does this match up with other data that we have at the school level,
like grades in school, perhaps, or
and some other assessments that we use in our schools. And then as the years go by and we have more, we can start to look at trends in the data. We can start to make better decisions about our curriculum overall. So if we're 2-3 years go by and we're really low in a particular area in math or ELA at a grade level, then we know we need to readjust our curriculum.
Something wrong,
maybe there's something that we're not.
Now, this was the first year that it was required here, and I think there are always glitches initially doing this thing. Now, does the assessment test itself change over time? In other words, will they find out things maybe and say, wait a minute?
Yeah, the assessment will evolve over time. I mean, there's a big change, which I think is a positive one, and I think most people. A lot of people who had concerns even with PARCC last year, one of the concerns was, again, for whatever reason they decided in the initial testing last year, there were 2 separate times that students were tested. So over about a 3 or 4 week period of time in March, April last year, we had to get every student tested. They took about 2 to 3 sessions in each of these areas. Then we came back in May and we had a whole other time for that. So I think just about everybody agreed, whether it was students, parents, educators, that was a little too much. Could we have one testing window?
Yeah.
So they heard, ultimately the final decision makers in the PARCC consortium heard that. They've reduced it to one testing window an overall reduction in the number of sessions, which will result in an overall reduction in the number of minutes. So I think that's certainly a positive step. And certainly they'll, they bring educators together every year to review the test questions, look at the results. If a large percentage of students got a particular question wrong, across the different student demographics, then they'll make adjustments to those kinds of questions.
Now, one of the issues seems to be the potential for using the results from PARCC to evaluate our teachers. And it seems to me that'd be a logical way. It's hard data on results. How do our teachers view PARCC? And
I think overall that makes teachers, and this is making a generalization, but I think it makes teachers a little bit antsy overall because they're, we're still in the initial stages of the testing, number one. I think a bigger issue for some teachers is maybe if you're, a grade 4 teacher and you have that student every day for English, language arts, or mathematics, you can see how those results could be better attributed to you. But then what do you do with a phys ed teacher or an art teacher who's teaching outside those subject areas?
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, then you get to the high school level and you have foreign language teachers. So then if you're not able to apply that consistently overall to every teacher, is it really fair to some teachers? But there are states that do it. There are ways to try to work that out. It could be something that we look to do further on down the road, but everything we're hearing from our new commissioner in the Rhode Island Department of Education right now is that conversation is not on the table right now. It may be. They haven't taken it completely off the table. It may be in future years, but right now we're just trying to get to, around the state, everybody's concerned about the same thing, getting our participation rate up, getting this to, to be in a place where, everybody's a little more comfortable with.
Yeah, and I think in our state, I think what the Rhode Island Department of Education says about this is kind of like the law, right?
Well, it is. I mean, we don't really get a choice. As the assistant superintendent in Portsmouth, I can't decide that we're, the superintendent decide that we're going to do something else. We essentially, yes, do have to do what the Department of Education says. I mean, we have a lot of opportunity for dialogue and input, which is what we're trying to do with our parents as well on the local level. But ultimately, when we have to do what the state says in these areas.
Well, I would hope that parents would look at the long view on this and let their kid be in the system here, and at the very least you'll learn about what they don't know, and
right, I agree.
Kind of fix that.
I think we're going to get much better results. Obviously for individual students, collectively, we need to have every student taking this assessment, which is what it was designed to do.
Well, Tom, we're out of time as usual. Interesting topic of conversation, and I look forward to seeing this evolve over time.
I do too.
I think it'd be a very useful tool for you guys.
Thank you.
So thanks for being on the show. I just want to mention a couple of public announcements here. First order of business is the Historical Society calendars are still on sale at Clements, Corey Farms, Fieldstones, Anna D's, and several other local retailers. They make great Christmas gifts for your friends and family, and you will be supporting a great cause, the preservation of Portsmouth history. Secondly, and speaking of holidays, there will be a polar dive next year in the Sakonnet River on New Year's Day, 1 January 2016 at noon, 12 o'clock noon. And it's being co-sponsored by the Island Park Seals and the Portsmouth Business Association. Everybody's invited to come down and take part in this annual Portsmouth tradition. I have to tell you, though, I've done this twice, and trust me, the best part is warming up at the bonfire, or even better, at the after-dive party at Beachcombers. That's about it for me for now. We'll see you next week. Thank you very much.